Hello, welcome back to my channel and to my Fighting Fantasy Gamebook Retrospective. And today we've reached book number 13, Freeway Fighter. Fantastic. Now this is the book where Ian Livingstone, for once, steps away from Alancia and does something very different. And whether you like this book or not depends a lot on whether you like the Mad Max movies directed by George Miller. I am a huge fan of the second one, The Road Warrior, which is one of my favourite action movies of all time. So I'm well disposed to this book from the off. And I was just reading through the rules, and I was just smiling like a little boy. You've got this car. Your interceptor has a turret-mounted, computer-controlled machine gun that can fire in all directions. It's got an unlimited supply of bullets, and it also has missile weapons which may be used during combat. You've got at your disposal 4 rockets, 3 canisters of iron spikes, and 2 rear-mounted oil sprays. It's like a sort of mix of a Mad Max car and a James Bond car. And I was just sort of smiling, happy as Larry. I was taken back to being a teenager again, reading this book for the first time. I just felt, sort of boyish glee about it. The whole book's got that feeling about it, At one point, there's this great bit where there's this rattlesnake that nearly bites you. So you go and get your gun and you shoot it gleefully. It's great fun. It's got a sort of punk feel to it. I love the opening introduction, right? It's set in the 21st of July, 2022. Now, this book was published, let me get this right. It was published in 1985, right? So 2022. And what happens is a disease breaks out and starts killing the population. It says it might have been a mutated virus or some lethal germ unknowingly released from a chemical warfare laboratory. How prescient is that? Well done, Fighting Fantasy. They almost got it right. So this disease it kills all these people, and so society starts falling apart, and you just get these little pockets of civilization. And then in between there's marauding car gangs who are all out to kill each other and steal petrol and food. So it's real Mad Max stuff. Now, I have to confess, right, I am a huge fan of this book, and I loved playing it all over again. The idea is that you have to go to this other town, exchange food for fuel, and then come back again. The gameplay is terrible. It's really poor. It's not very well worked out, and a lot of it is just rolling to test your luck, or rolling, 2 dice, and is it equal to or lower than your skill score? So much of the game is resolved in that way. It's not really resolved in you thinking through puzzles or clues. So it's a bit of a shame in that way. The gameplay feels very rushed. Also, I like the idea that you have to get to San Anglo and make the trade of the food and the fuel, and you've also got to get back. But unfortunately, the getting back bit is very anticlimactic. Not much happens, apart from a rather odd encounter with a rat man. You'll know what I mean. It's also got the most lurid illustration in the book. But basically, just don't go near the rat man. Just leave the rat man alone. Nothing good comes of the rat man. But it's a very anticlimactic end to the book, and that doesn't help the feel of the gameplay. In many ways, Freeway Fighter reminds me of the 1980s, and it reminds me of a time when fantasy writers and artists were blokes, who talked about cars and birds. They were like, presenters on Top Gear. I never forget, right, there was this 2000 AD, it might have been a Judge Dredd annual, or was a 2000 AD annual, and it had a little sort of introduction to the writers and the artists with little bullet point questions. And one of the questions was, what's your favourite car? And they'd say something like, I don't know, because I don't know anything about the cars, a Mercedes-Benz with a 2-litre engine and a V8 exhaust or something. And you get that feeling in this book. You can tell that Ian Livingstone's into his cars, and he likes looking at car magazines like blokes do. Speaking of blokiness, there's lots of lovely ladies, or birds, in this book. Check out the illustration that accompanies paragraph 34, when you meet a young girl comes out of the office wearing a t-shirt and blue jeans outside Joe's garage. Don't stop there, guys. But if you look at Kevin Bulmer's illustration, he's alert to the details that might interest a 14-year-old boy about a young lady, if you see what I mean. Talking of birds, there's Amber. She's an odd character, isn't she? So you finally get to San Anglo, and you meet this woman in these burned out car wrecks, and you say, oh, hello, and she goes, hello, rather roughly, and she says, do you need any help? And she goes, well, not if you're one of those horrible people who's just bombed our encampment. And you go, I'm not honest. And she goes, oh, all right then, let's go to San Anglo. Not the greatest security person you want protecting your town is Amber, but there you go. Like Forest of Doom, another Livingston book, it's fairly easy, and going back to it, it's not quite as fun and expansive as I remembered it being, but I still find it very entertaining. The front cover is by Jim Burns. He actually did 2 covers for this. I believe the other one was for a sort of game. I like both of them. Both capture the punkish spirit of the Mad Max films. I think they're great. Now, the interior illustrations were done by a guy called Kevin Bulmer. And in this rather wonderful book, which is the history of fighting fantasy artwork, they admit that Kevin Bulmer did the artwork in 9 days straight as a favour to Ian Livingstone. And you can kind of tell. Let's just say it's a bit sparse. But I like it. It's got a comic book feel to it. It's also got a very cinematic feel to it. You can tell that Bulmer did it very quickly, though, because, for example, if you look at the illustration opposite paragraph 13, right, it's clear in the write-up. He says, the passenger is holding a machine gun mounted on the nose of the sidecar. He reminds you of early pilots with his goggles and a leather flying cap. I don't know if you can see that. But that, and not goggles and a leather flying cap. It's a spaceman. You know, obviously he wanted the sort of 1940s, sort of wartime bike look. But I don't think Kevin Bulmer had read that paragraph when he did it. But the illustrations, I think, are great fun. They've got a cinematic quality. They're amusing. They're in the spirit of the book. But they are a bit sparse. The whole book is a bit sparse. But it's great fun, and I'm glad Ian Livingstone went off on a tangent and did it. Incidentally, Ian Livingstone's new book has come out, The Dungeon on Blood Island. It's a sort of sequel to Death Trap Dungeon. I played it through at the weekend, and it's great fun. It takes a while to get going, but it's good fun. It's got some good monsters and some good ideas in it. Very similar to Death Trap Dungeon. You have to collect things, and then you meet the Dungeon Master at the end, and he gives you a trial, all that sort of stuff. But a good laugh. So that's Freeway Fighter. Next time, book 14... Temple of Terror.